On the day she disappears, high school teacher Tara Grinstead spends the afternoon with some of her students. They're preparing for the Miss Georgia Sweet Potato Pageant, a big event in a small, close-knit town like Ocilla, Georgia.
On that Saturday, Tara had helped a lot of the girls prepare for the pageant. She had done their hair and their makeup.
A lot of them borrowed her dresses as well. And she had so much fun. She had a really good time with the girls. They had snacks and had lunch.
Tara has an especially close relationship with many of her students.
I never heard anybody say a bad thing about Tara. They related really well to her. She always went the extra mile to help her kids, and she made class so much fun.
Most of Tara's students would say, well, she's my teacher, but she's also my friend.
Tara has been involved in beauty pageants since her high school years, but has her own agenda about the competitions.
Pageanting was not for show and not for everybody to tell her she's beautiful. I think it gave her self-confidence, number one. I think it bettered her self-esteem.
Contestant number 2.
In 1999, Tara won the title of Miss Tifton, Georgia. That victory gave her the opportunity to compete in the Miss Georgia pageant.
Once you accomplish one of your dreams, how often do you get to do that? And she did by going to Miss Georgia.
Tara doesn't win the Miss Georgia pageant, but her family says that for her, winning was never the most important thing.
I never saw in her that winning a pageant was an ego thing. It was not about just the title of winning. It was always about accomplishing something.
Tara's goal had always been education. She succeeds in funding her entire undergraduate education with money earned from pageants.
She knew college is expensive and it was going to be tough on her, and she did not want to burden her mother any more than she had to.
After getting her bachelor's degree in education, Tara works full-time and takes graduate classes at night, working steadily toward her ultimate goal, a PhD in education.
She had gotten a 6-year degree in administration, and that was what she was pursuing her doctorate in. I think she eventually wanted to be a high school principal.
That Saturday night, a happy and relaxed Tara leaves the sweet potato pageant and heads over to a cookout attended by friends from school.
Tara stayed at the cookout for about 2 hours and left at approximately 11 o'clock p.m., ostensibly to go home.
She said she was going to watch the video of the pageant, and then she was going to go to bed.
In a small town like Ocilla, neighbors look out for each other. Because she lives alone, Tara and her next-door neighbors have a system for saying, "I'm home and all is well."
Every night when she came home, the first thing she would do was go into her room and turn on the lamp in the bedroom. The neighbors would look out and they would see that lamp on, and it would kind of be a signal to them Tara's made it home.
That night, the light in Tara's window never goes on. The next day, nobody sees Tara. No one is able to contact her, including her mother.
The more that she called and the longer the time went on that Tara didn't call her back, she started to get concerned.
Sometimes people just want to be left alone. But I can't imagine her ever ignoring her mother's phone call.
On Monday morning, Tara doesn't show up to teach her classes at Irwin County High School. Friends and family know that something is very wrong.
That was a red flag for me because I knew what a dedicated teacher Tara was.
Tara had never missed a day of school without prearranging a substitute teacher.
One of Tara's friends calls Ocilla Police Chief Billy Hancock.
He indicated to me that Tara had not been seen over the last day, that the school had been contacted. She had not shown up there.
Chief Hancock arrives at Tara's residence at approximately 10 a.m. on Monday. Her car is parked in its usual spot under the carport.
The fact that her car was there and she wasn't meant that she probably left with someone.
The doors of the car are unlocked. Oddly, there is an envelope containing $100 in cash left in the center console.
I would think it'd be unusual for anybody to leave that amount of cash in the car and leave it unlocked.
That's not like Tara to have money laying around any place.
Inside Tara's house, however, everything looks fairly normal.
There was no sign of forcible entry. There was no clear indication that any kind of struggle had occurred inside.
Both the exterior and interior of Tara's residence are photographed in detail.
Every room was photographed thoroughly to capture, what the condition of the house was at the time of our arrival.
Clothing and accessories scattered around the floor help police reconstruct some of Tara's last known movements.
The clothes Tara was wearing on the night of October 22nd were on the floor in her bedroom, which indicated to us that she had indeed arrived home. Her bed appeared as if possibly somebody had either slept in it or laid in it.
Her cell phone was in the charger. It was still there in the charger. And to us, it indicates that she left the house with intentions of coming back. She knew she wasn't going to be gone long enough to have use of her cell phone.
Investigators locate more intriguing clues outside Tara's house. A business card is wedged into her front door. They find something far more disturbing on the ground.
Initial law enforcement officers who arrived immediately spotted a latex glove lying in the grass in the front yard, several feet away from the front door.
Then I really got scared.
For investigators, the latex glove is an ominous indicator of foul play.
It certainly indicated to us that there was a strong likelihood that a crime had occurred. It would imply that whoever was using it was trying to avoid being detected.
The latex glove's not something that all of us have. I think somebody had it very specifically so that they would not leave a trace.
Our gut feeling upon processing Tara's residence was that a crime had occurred.
Coming up, police investigate men in Tara's life and uncover some troubling leads.
She gave me the impression that he acted like he was not stable.
30-year-old high school teacher Tara Grinstead has vanished.
I have never known Tara to just take off without letting somebody know. I'm not aware of any time that she ever did that. Everybody might not know, but somebody always knew where she was.
By the time local police arrive at her residence, nobody has seen or heard from Tara for almost 2 days.
Everybody knew that she just had not, gone off for a couple of days, that something had happened. Something serious had happened to Tara.
Due to the urgent nature of the case, Ocilla Police request the assistance of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation.
When a person goes missing and we're asked to investigate, we operate with the premise that we're going to presume the worst and hope for the best.
To investigators, a latex glove found near Tara's front door makes it look like someone was attempting to cover up a crime.
Either there was an abduction of Tara in which someone wore gloves, or they returned to the scene and accidentally dropped the glove.
Besides the glove, police have few indications that a crime took place.
To us, there was no clear sign of a struggle. However, that doesn't affect how you proceed in an investigation, because there can be an abduction with no indication of a struggle. It'd be quite easy to take someone out of their house at gunpoint and there'd be no disturbance whatsoever.
My gut feeling is that somebody came by and she left with someone that she knew, that something horrible happened after that.
Tara's family begins to fear that they might not ever see her again. Meanwhile, the lack of a crime scene presents a daunting challenge to investigators.
In a typical criminal investigation, you have an outcome against which you can measure evidence and theories. In a missing persons case, you don't have that outcome, so you can't measure anything against anything. Everything remains in play.
Law enforcement seals Tara's house and takes her car and the latex glove in evidence processing.
We actually had a crime lab scientist on the phone immediately who was preparing a plan as to how to handle that latex glove to maximize the possibility of the recovery of evidence.
Tara has been missing for 12 hours. That evening, at Irwin County High School, students and teachers band together in an effort to find her.
The first flyer that was made just basically had a picture of Tara and just had the words missing on it. It just described her height and weight and color of her hair and her eyes.
The students are coming up and they're like, what can we do? We can't just stand around. And I was so touched that, these kids did that. They did this until like 1 o'clock in the morning.
Tara's fellow teachers and students design and then distribute hundreds of flyers throughout the Ocilla area.
Posters were everywhere in this community. They were on light poles, in business windows, on cars, just almost everywhere imaginable.
Georgia Bureau of Investigation agents interview all of Tara's neighbors and conduct an extensive search of her neighborhood.
Also, some tracking dogs were brought in to try to see if they could pick up on any kind of scent of Tara, to see if she had gone somewhere on foot that we might be able to find her.
Both the canvas and the search dogs turn up nothing of value to investigators. Searching for clues, they delve deeply into Tara's background.
You learn as much about the victim as you can, their timeline, their propensities, their associates.
They learned that Tara's circle of acquaintances was huge, from her second job at a department store makeup counter to the various campuses where she took graduate classes.
She had been going to school at night for several years, working on her master's and her specialist degree, so that involved a lot of students that she had met that obviously we would not know.
But it is closer to home that investigators uncover a deeper mystery.
A lot of disappearance cases, you kind of have an immediate focus. You have, a close associate, a boyfriend, or what have you, ex-husband, husband. In this case, what we learned was Tara had several such associates.
Looking into Tara's personal life, they find a complex series of relationships with men.
Tara was involved romantically with several different persons in a close period of time, and she kept those relationships separate from one another.
Investigators focus first on Tara's ex-boyfriend, Marcus Harper.
Tara had a long-term romantic relationship with Marcus Harper. They had broken up approximately a year earlier. Tara had ended the relationship because she believed Marcus wasn't ready to get married.
Investigators learn that Harper served in the Ocilla Police Department for 4 years and then enlisted in the United States Army Rangers in 2001.
She's very proud of him and what he accomplished because he was really good at what he did.
Investigators from the GBI conduct a series of interviews with Marcus Harper.
We interviewed Marcus Harper the very first day and talked to him several times after that.
Over the years that the couple was together, Tara's friends and family got to know Marcus well.
They really looked like a great couple. I mean, he was big and strong, and she was, they were like a really good couple, and I think that they enjoyed each other.
Anytime that we were around Marcus, we had a very good relationship with him. He was always very respectful to us. He was always respectful to Tara when we were with them.
Anita Gaddis sees her sister's relationship with Marcus quite differently.
Tara was a little bit afraid of him. He's been an Army Ranger, and the training that they have is just unbelievable. The things that they can do, the things that they survive. And we stayed in touch with him during his training, and I know what he was able to survive. So I know what the guy's made of.
Despite the differing perceptions within her family, investigators find no history of violence in Tara and Marcus's relationship. But they discover that several months before she disappeared, Tara did experience the threat of violence at the hands of one of her former students.
He had gone over to her house one afternoon in March of 2005. He wanted to speak to her.
The 20-year-old graduated from Irwin County High School the previous year. After taking Tara's history class, he developed a fondness for her.
They had a closer relationship upon his graduation. He would speak to her and see her from time to time.
I just thought it was, one of her students that had, a crush on Tara because she was so beautiful and so sweet to all of her students. And he was the soul that Tara would have wanted to help.
But according to friends, Tara had expressed concern about her former student's behavior.
She had told me she'd been having trouble with him, like kind of getting a little too attached to her or whatever, and kind of got an impression that he was not stable.
Months before Tara disappeared, he came to her house and tried to physically force his way inside.
He wanted to speak to her, and she didn't want to talk to him at that time, and she wouldn't let him in the house, and he became quite upset, loud, began yelling and banging on her door trying to gain entry.
That was a very violent situation. Neighbors actually had to call the police because he was so loud.
I was yelling and screaming through the door and banging on the door, and she gave me the impression that he acted like he was not himself.
Coming up, in the weeks before she disappears, Tara's personal life begins to unravel.
She called hysterically. I said, Tara, are you okay? You are not thinking about suicide.
Tara Grinstead has been missing for 24 hours. Agents from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation learned that 7 months earlier, one of Tara's former students appeared uninvited at her home and tried to force his way inside.
He wanted to speak to her. She did not come to the door. He began to bang on the door. Basically, there started to become a disturbance.
I don't know if he read some signals wrong or if he just had a crush on her that he took too far.
I believe she just thought he might go away, but I think she realized that he wasn't going away, so she came to the door. They spoke briefly, and I think She tried to go back inside. She then started to shut her door, and he grabbed her on the arm. She pulled away and was able to shut the door.
At the time, Ocilla police are unable to get the former student to calm down, so he is arrested for disorderly conduct. According to Tara's handwritten statement to police, he invaded my privacy in my own home. While doing so in a raging and out-of-control manner, I was very scared for my well-being, as well as concerned about him.
His actions at the house did concern us, that there was some sort of a connection between he and Tara.
She never told me that she had any kind of inappropriate relationship with him. I don't think she did.
Still, the former student's strange behavior is reason enough for investigators to look for a connection with Tara's disappearance.
We thought it critical to interview him immediately. He was working at a job in Milledgeville, Georgia, about 100 miles away, and we immediately had an agent in that area find him.
The former student is able to account for his time on the night that Tara disappeared. Meanwhile, investigators keep digging into Marcus Harper and his relationship with Tara. In February of 2002, Marcus was deployed to Afghanistan. According to her sister, the separation and distance became difficult for Tara to deal with.
She said she really could not stay in that kind of relationship because if they go overseas and something bad happens to them, you never find them, nobody knows anything.
I could tell after that things changed a lot for them. He changed and their relationship changed. But she just didn't want to quit. She loved him.
Tara and Marcus end their relationship, but remain in close contact.
They still saw each other occasionally. They still talked and emailed and called. And so Tara took that as there was still some kind of relationship.
Then, 3 weeks before Tara disappears, Marcus returns home to Ocilla, but doesn't contact her.
He had not told Tara he was home. Tara found out that he was back in Ocilla in Irwin County from a third party, and that made her very upset.
That really devastated her. She felt betrayed, and at that point I said, okay, look, he didn't want you to know he was back. And I remember saying to her, now it's the time you move on, but she just could not quite get over Marcus.
Investigators learn that Tara calls Marcus from her car and confronts him about not getting in touch.
She was coming back from class in Waycross when she had engaged in a telephone conversation with Marcus Harper.
Marcus tells Tara that their relationship is over once and for all. According to friends and family, she has an emotional breakdown on the road.
She called hysterically and just felt like she was not able to drive. And one person went and picked her up, and the other passenger drove her car home. So they took her back to her house, and from what I understand, they had to carry her in, and she was just so, hysterical, crying.
Tara's fragile emotional state worries those closest to her.
I said, Tara, in these exact words, do you need anything? Do we need to do anything for you? Are you okay? You are not thinking about suicide. No, I promise you, I'm not, and that is not it. She said, I'm a little depressed, which everybody gets, but I am not suicidal.
Tara's family believes that she would never have committed suicide, regardless of how depressed she may have been over Marcus.
She was just not that type of person. She would not have done that to our mother. There's absolutely no way, regardless of how, distraught or upset she was.
Agents at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation come to the same conclusion.
The possibility of suicide was something that was certainly considered, but after a few days and she hadn't been found, it made it much less likely, because when one commits suicide, it's quite difficult to dispose of your own body. So we believe that had that occurred, we would have found her already.
In the meantime, investigators continue to gather information from Marcus Harper. In a series of interviews, he accounts for his time on the night Tara disappeared.
He said that on Saturday night he had gone to the White Horse Saloon in Fitzgerald, where he visited with some friends until approximately 2 a.m.
After that, Marcus says he met up with his friend and former partner on the Ocilla Police Department and spent the night in a police cruiser, doing a ride-along.
We were able to corroborate that as best it could be corroborated. There was no point that he didn't cooperate with us in the investigation.
For the moment, investigators' focus shifts away from Marcus Harper. Then, the business card found on Tara's front door provides a new lead. Agents learn that it belongs to a police officer from a nearby town, a married man.
We learned that he and Tara were very close. He had been trying to contact Tara all day Sunday and had left a number of messages on her answering machine.
A neighbor tells police that he was a frequent visitor to Tara's house.
He went down there and left his card in the door so that when she got home that she would know that he had been by there.
Investigators interview the officer, and he provides an alibi for his time the night Tara disappeared.
He was interviewed and gave a very thorough timeline of his actions over the last couple of weeks.
They put his family through questioning and people he was with that night. The thing is if he had anything to do with it, he wouldn't have gone down there and left a business card and door, you know.
4 days after Tara's disappearance, investigators find themselves back at square one. Desperate to uncover tangible evidence, they organize a large-scale search for Tara.
A organized, comprehensive ground search took place of the entire perimeter of Irwin County.
We had horses, we had airplanes, people volunteered, we had four-wheelers, four-wheel drive vehicles, we had people walking.
The massive search effort uses every tool available in Irwin County's arsenal. Dozens of agencies and hundreds of volunteer searchers take part in the effort to find Tara.
It's a very emotional thing, especially when you know the area they're going, when you know they're looking in open, deep wells, when you know they're going through swamps, when you know they're looking in abandoned grain bins.
It was pretty intense. It was long hours. Usually the searches would go on from, say, 9 o'clock 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning until dark.
Most of them did not know Tara. They had never met Tara. And you've got hundreds of strangers coming to search for this beautiful person that has vanished.
Despite the massive effort, none of the searches come up with any evidence related to Tara's disappearance.
It makes you feel helpless because, you want to solve these problems and, you want to catch the bad guy if there's one involved.
The one thing good that came out that we didn't find her, was what it gave us hope, of course, that she was still alive.
With the search effort yielding no leads, the latex glove found in Tara's yard looms as a piece of potentially critical evidence. Since it was recovered, forensic tests have been ongoing, but agents are circumspect.
We weren't real hopeful that we would be able to retrieve meaningful DNA or fingerprint evidence from it, but we had to try. So once we obtained the glove, we took it to the GBI crime lab in Atlanta.
Forensic scientists put the glove through a battery of tests, including one looking for the presence of DNA. It's a long shot, because according to police, it's very difficult to recover useful evidence from latex gloves.
If you process for fingerprints first, it will destroy DNA evidence. If you process for DNA evidence, you may destroy or somehow cause problems with the fingerprint evidence. They basically cut it up based on the probability of which section of the glove would reveal which type of evidence and processed it accordingly.
We all watch TV, and on CSI, they do the DNA, and, we know everything within 30 minutes, but, it's weeks and weeks and weeks to get results back. And, it's very frustrating to just, sit and wait.
Despite the long odds, investigators hit the jackpot.
We were able to recover both fingerprint evidence and DNA evidence.
The fingerprints found on the glove are only partial prints, limiting their use in the investigation.
Fortunately, we also had DNA on the glove, male DNA.
Thanks to the DNA evidence, GBI agents finally have a powerful lead in Tara's disappearance.
The DNA evidence lets us know that a male was at Tara's house and either wearing or had a glove in their possession.
Coming up, police look for a DNA match, believing that person may be responsible for Tara's disappearance.
We began swabbing pretty much any associate of Tara's that we came across.
And later,
volunteers are back searching for Tara Grinstead.
The news media descends on Ocilla, potentially compromising the investigation.
When you lose control of the flow of information, you don't know what you lost.
Has been in full force for 10 days. Investigators recovered DNA evidence from the latex glove found at Tara's residence, suggesting that an unknown male was on Tara's property during the time she disappeared.
We knew that we were looking for a male potential offender. So at that point, we ensured that we obtained DNA samples from most everyone we could associate with Tara.
She met hundreds of people every day, and she was such a personable person and smiled, and she would introduce herself to anybody.
Any male male that came in contact with Tara, whether it was at her high school, at one of the colleges she went to, there's very few people that I know that they haven't swabbed.
Agents collect the DNA of 144 men that had any contact with Tara, no matter how distant.
Essentially, all you do is take a swab of the inside of someone's cheek and submit that swab for comparison against the questioned DNA. In our case, the DNA from the glove.
But when the samples of DNA are compared, there is no match with any of Tara's male associates. Investigators find no match with the National DNA Database either.
We've investigated everyone that we know of that was closely associated with Tara, and we can't find anything to indicate that any of them are responsible for her disappearance.
But investigators can't eliminate any of the men in Tara's life either. They might have had an accomplice whose DNA was left on the glove.
Maybe someone was involved in moving Tara's body. Maybe someone was involved in cleaning up, whatever evidence may have been at a residence before we arrived.
The lack of conclusive evidence frustrates investigators. Although each of Tara's close male associates provide credible alibis, none can account for every minute of their time during the 34 hours between when Tara was last seen and when she was discovered missing.
It's difficult for anyone to account for every hour of every day and provide an alibi for that. There are times that they're alone, and nobody knows exactly what they're doing.
Because so much is unknown, investigators still need to consider all possibilities surrounding Tara's disappearance.
She left on her own, that she was trying to make some point to resolve one of her relationships, that any of these people that we encountered in the first day or days thereafter could have gotten into an altercation with her, or that there could be just a random offender out there that saw Tara as a crime of opportunity. Nothing was beyond the possibility, and nothing is. So, as much as we'd love to clear people, say that they had no involvement, we're unable to do so because we don't know what happened to Tara.
As time drags on and Tara isn't found, investigators face an unexpected new challenge.
Turning our attention now to the case of that missing Georgia high school teacher, Tara Grinstead.
Volunteers are back searching for Tara Grinstead.
Growing attention from the national news media makes a sensitive investigation difficult to manage.
The entire interior of the residence and exterior was being broadcast as newscaster after newscaster toured the residence, videoed it, and put it on the air.
Your possible crime scene is all of a sudden exposed to the national media. That's just something that law enforcement isn't used to having happen.
According to both Ocilla Police and the GBI, confidential details of their investigation are reported by the news media without their knowledge or consent.
Things that were in the residence that we might have used to trip up somebody in an interview was gone.
Investigators never wanted their discovery of the latex glove to become public knowledge, but it did.
Once it became public, anyone that we interviewed that may have been responsible for Tara's disappearance and was the one that left that glove knew we had it. You might think that he dropped it somewhere else, or may not even realize he'd left a glove behind at all.
Equally troubling, private citizens set up tip lines, but sometimes neglect to share information with law enforcement.
One well-known tip line was actually going to the cell phone of a bounty hunter. What information may have been lost because of that, I can't imagine. When you lose control of the flow of information, you don't know what you lost.
The sometimes intrusive media coverage also stokes the fires of accusation.
With all the media attention, there were a lot of armchair sleuths all over the country that were contacting us and some conducting their own investigation.
One website, called Backward State, goes so far as to present excerpts from one of GBI agent Gary Rothwell's television interviews, played backwards. The amateur sleuth claims that the interview audio played in reverse reveals hidden clues about the people responsible for Tara's disappearance.
I was identifying the true offender, and all you had to do was play my interview backwards. It was amazing.
Then, perhaps due to the media blitz, several new tips promising information into Tara's disappearance come in.
I got a phone call and was told that there had been a fire not too far out of town, and they said, I don't want to upset you, but I just need to prepare you. There is a chance that it could be connected to Tara.
There was a residence a few miles from Ocilla where a house burned and a vehicle burned. There were some theories developed that arson was used to cover up evidence of Tara's abduction.
GBI agents and support personnel go to the burned out house to investigate.
We headed to that scene as fast as possible, coordinating, having appropriate personnel to process it.
Anytime there's burned bodies or the remains of something are found, it's the first thing that goes through my mind, is it her?
But the search effort yields nothing.
Nothing at the arson scene was found that could be associated with Tara.
In the beginning, every time what sounded like a viable tip would come in, we would immediately think, this is it. After the first probably 2 or 3 times that happened, you learn to be guarded in your optimism.
Over the next few months, more tips come in, but none bring investigators any closer to finding Tara.
There's been many times when we had what we call he ain't right moments, where we've encountered people in this investigation that their behaviors didn't seem appropriate. That's happened lots of times. Unfortunately, we haven't found evidence to support those feelings. Most of the time, we found evidence completely to the contrary.
Three years go by without any meaningful leads. Then, there is a bizarre development in the case.
I've decided to confess a few things. I've decided to do it on YouTube because there's millions of people that it helps play my game.
With his face and voice digitally distorted, a man calling himself the Catch Me Killer posts an anonymous video online.
I'm going to confess to 16 murders. But in order to do so, I'm going to give everybody a clue. Many clues.
He claimed that he was a serial killer. He claimed that he had murdered 16 people, and he alluded to the fact that Tara was one of them.
The video doesn't refer to Tara by name, but cites details that clearly identify her, including the date of her disappearance.
He claimed that he had slit her throat, and he made reference to her screams into the night and said something about, but my blade she could not fight. It was just horrible things that he said.
It was almost a sickening feeling to have an individual get up there and say those kind of things.
The GBI quickly launches an investigation to identify and apprehend the man claiming to have murdered Tara Grinstead.
Here we have a guy who's basically claiming that he's killed a woman we've been looking for 4 years. We had to find him.
Coming up, investigators zero in on the Catch Me Killer.
We executed search warrants on the basis that Tara was a victim of a crime and that he was the perpetrator. We were looking for evidence.
For almost 3.5 years, there are still no suspects in her disappearance. But now, a man calling himself the Catch Me Killer posts an anonymous video online. With his voice and likeness digitally obscured, he claims to have killed 16 people, including Tara Grinstead.
Once all 16 bodies are found, you'll know exactly who I am, because I have knowledge that the police know about, the FBI know about, they can go on this.
Investigators note that the Catch Me Killer appears to possess intimate knowledge of Tara's life.
He described Tara's occupation, Tara's participation in beauty pageants, locations on Highway 32, which ran right through Ocilla, Georgia. There was no question he was talking about Tara.
I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, just hanging on every minute for information. I thought, this is what we've been waiting for, and this is going to be the answer. We're going to finally know what happened to her.
Officials from several agencies join forces to track down the self-confessed killer. Agents get search warrants in order to locate the computer used to post the video.
What we did is ultimately traced the posting of that YouTube video to a couple of locations in Gainesville, Georgia, in Hall County, Georgia.
Investigators identify the man behind the video as Andrew Scott Haley. They raid his home and other locations in Georgia and seize his computer, camera, and writings. Within hours, they determine that Haley's video confession is a hoax.
He thought it was just a game, and he thought he could dupe people, and he somehow took pleasure in doing that. I don't think he gave any consideration to the harm that he was causing the victims' families and others that cared about Tara.
I still cannot understand what this person must have said to himself every day to justify what he was doing and to tell himself that it was okay. This was not a teenage prank. This was a grown, married man with children of his own.
Haley is found guilty of felony tampering with evidence and making false statements, and sentenced to 10 years in prison. As a first offender, he'll serve just 2 years in a work-release jail. Today, the Grinstead case file is the Georgia Bureau of Investigation's biggest active case. Finding Tara still hinges on making a DNA match to the latex glove found outside her home.
It's almost amazing that we haven't gotten a hit yet. If someone is responsible for Tara's disappearance, it's highly likely we haven't talked to them yet.
Investigators still believe the case will eventually be solved.
We have evidence. We have DNA evidence. We have fingerprint evidence. It's not like we have nothing. We have a lot of information. We just don't know what it all means.
In the meantime, Tara's family and friends continue to wait.
Is she gone? Is she dead? When you just don't know any answers, you don't have a way of controlling your emotions.
It's a horrible situation for anybody to have to go through. It's worse than death. It's final. Someone vanishing. It's not final until you find them.
You see how hurt these people are at the loss or disappearance of their loved one, and you want to put an end to that.
I've never experienced anything like that. I do have girls of my own. I just can't imagine what it would feel like if one of those were in a situation like Tara.
With Tara missing now for more than 5 years, her family is desperate for closure on their tragedy.
I just feel like
He's cold, he's clammy, he's shivering.
She was drooling from a mouth.
Ryan's blood glucose was so low that it was completely undetectable.
We've got somebody who seems to be full of hatred towards old people.
It was really shocking that we had something like that in Newcastle. Who would do this?
Are we looking at a complete serial killer?
Wallsend's a pretty major suburb of Newcastle. My name's Sam Rigney. I'm a court reporter for the Newcastle Herald, which is a newspaper on the east coast of Australia. Wallsend has 90,000 residents, and it's a working class suburb that's home to people who work in the healthcare sector and aged care sector. It's also home to a number of aged care facilities, including summer care.
Summit Aged Care was quite a modern facility. I think it had only been there for a couple of years. My name's Matt Faber. I'm a retired detective sergeant. I was in the New South Wales Police Force for 33 years. Summit Aged Care, it's a large complex. It's 3 stories, and some of the residents in there suffer from dementia, so they require more acute care.
Gwen Fowler had been married to her husband for 55 years. He passed away in 2005. She had a number of children who'd come and visit her. She was really well liked in the facility and she was well loved by her family. They saw her as being caring and generous and loving. Gwen was described as a perfect resident.
Gwendolyn Fowler was also very, very frail, weighing only 43 kilograms, less than 7 stone, and she had rheumatoid arthritis. My name's Dr. Sarah Jarvis, and I'm a GP. She had dementia, which made her prone to falls, of course, along with all the other challenges it brought, and she had type 2 diabetes. This was a lady who was very vulnerable indeed.
But there was nothing to suggest that she was going to have a turn or die or go to hospital imminently.
Her daughter came to visit her at about 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, and when she first came in to visit her mother, she found her non-responsive.
Things seem to very suddenly have changed. I'm Donna Youngs. I'm a professor of investigative psychology. She's not in a good state at all.
She was drooling from her mouth, and certainly not normal in her presentation. So she raised the alarm with staff who came out and assessed her and quickly realised that things weren't right. Gwen was taken by ambulance from the aged care facility shortly afterwards and was taken to the John Hunter Hospital. And so, of course, the staff there performed various observations and tests on her, and they realised her blood sugars were extremely low. Given her age, they discussed with the family, who had previously prepared an end-of-life plan for her.
Her family said they didn't want any medical treatment done to her and she should just be kept comfortable. So she was returned back to summer care that night and placed in palliative care.
She died early the next morning on the 19th of October.
They thought that was through natural causes. So what that means is there's no intervention by the police or the coroner, and essentially she will go to the family and they can conduct a funeral, etc.
Another patient at the Summit Care Home was Audrey Manuel, a lady who weighed just 36 kilograms and had dementia. But nonetheless, these conditions were being successfully managed.
She had a family who would come and visit her. They described her as being a sweetheart. She was a little, elderly, frail woman. She was very nice, very easygoing, always happy and smiling and up for a chat.
On the morning of the 19th of October, things had started off very well. Audrey had been checked on by a nurse at 7 o'clock. She was walking around a little bit, as she usually did. She was offered a cup of tea at about 10:30. Now, the member of staff who offered her a cup of tea said she did seem a little bit confused, but this was a lady with dementia.
She was sitting in a chair out in the common area. At the time, she was seen to be going into unconsciousness as well.
Audrey seems to be shaking, and it's discovered that her blood sugar has dropped very low.
Audrey went into hospital. She was immediately given glucagon, which is a medication which is traditionally given to raise blood sugar very quickly if you have a dangerous level of low blood sugar, a hypo. However, she stayed on a glucose drip for the next 5 days and never recovered her previous level of function. She wasn't able to eat independently. She had to have thickened foods, which would have been to stop her inhaling it into her lungs and choking on it.
Audrey never recovers fully from this and eventually dies in 2015, just 18 months later.
At approximately 4:30, 5 o'clock later that afternoon, a nurse discovered an elderly resident.
Brian Kelly was 80. He was well liked by the other staff and the residents. No one had any issues with him.
During the course of the day, he was checked on several times, and by the early afternoon, he seemed to be asleep. That wasn't unusual for him.
But the nurses can't wake him. He's cold, he's clammy, he's shivering, and it's discovered that he has developed hypothermia and his blood sugar has dropped very low.
Hypoglycemia, or low blood sugar, is usually based on a blood sugar that's less than 4 millimoles per litre. A severe hypo is less than 3. Ryan's blood glucose was so low that it was completely undetectable. And even when he was given glucagon to raise his blood sugar, it only went up to 0.9. That's less than 1 millimoles per litre, exactly like Audrey and exactly like Gwendolyn Fowler. 3 incidents in the course of just 2 days.
There was a GP, a specialist doctor at the John Hunter, who's an endocrinologist. He had seen Audrey and Ryan both come in on the same day with the same symptoms from the same nursing home. Basically, they were both in a hypoglycemic state, and he had actually began forming his own suspicions that something was up.
Audrey Manuel had an insulin overdose.
At Ryan's autopsy, he was found to have died of aspiration pneumonia. In other words, he'd got an infection in his lungs because he'd aspirated. He'd breathed into his lungs something that he should have swallowed down. It was also found to be due to an insulin overdose. This was insulin overdose in at least 2 of the cases.
I had no clue how insulin works prior to this investigation. As an example, you can't drink it and have any effect from it. It has to be injected. There was no therapeutic reason for that, and this started to now look very firmly like an attack. Because bear in mind, they weren't insulin dependent, nor were they supposed to receive any sort of injections.
The levels of insulin that were given to these people were so high that they could have only been done deliberately, and they could have only been done with the intention to kill someone.
You don't expect your grandmother, mother, aunt, etc. to go into a nursing home to be murdered. That's for sure.
It was really shocking that we had something like that in Newcastle, somebody like that who would do this.
There was a sense of outrage by members of the community.
Detectives went to Summit Care and launched an investigation. They started a strike force.
We had to get an urgent coroner's order to retrieve her body because unfortunately by then her body had already been transferred up to Coffs Harbour. In fact, they were actually getting ready to have the funeral, so we had to get an urgent coronial order, which was only just before the funeral took place. So it was brought back to the morgue here in Newcastle.
It's an extremely high level of insulin.
Three of the residents with exactly the same symptoms, and all of those with these huge doses of insulin inside their bodies. We suspected it's probably one person committing it, but you could never be sure at that particular time.
They didn't search the facility because it had essentially been business as usual at Summit Care in the intervening days, and the place had been cleaned, and the sharps and all the syringes that had been used had been thrown out, and so police saw it as being a contaminated scene.
There were no cameras throughout the facility that would assist trying to identify who might have committed the crime. That would have made our job a lot easier. But there is CCTV cameras at that front door, and similarly at the back door where most of the staff would come and go at the start and finish of their shifts. And visitors to the facility sign the sign-in sheet.
There was 37 hours of footage on each camera. Hours and hours and hours and hours.
There was approximately 320 people in all that attended the facility over that 48-hour period.
The police gather all the documentation they can from the care home, the death certificates, the timesheets of the staff.
The investigating team would have been looking for overlaps for people who were present on several occasions, or ideally on all the occasions these suspicious events happened.
Whoever injected these residents must have known them, and that the residents wouldn't have let anyone just come over and inject them with a substance if they didn't know who they were.
The extreme vulnerability of these victims and the absolute abuse of trust.
The overwhelming reaction from the staff on the floor and the administrative staff was, no, that can't be right, that this can't be a deliberate attack, that for some reason there's been an error of some kind, and there is no possibility that either any of our staff or anyone on the facility have deliberately caused this.
Gary Davis was a team leader.
When he spoke about the patients, he spoke about them as exemplary patients. He talked about them as being perfect residents of the care home.
His job was to go around and hand out the medication in the mornings, and that was oral medications.
The police start to dig a little bit more into Gary Davis and what kind of person he was. There's no doubt Gary Davis had a tough childhood. His mother openly stated that she wished he had been born a girl. Gary's parents split up when he was 3 or 4. His mother remarried, and apparently, allegedly, her new partner was abusive physically and verbally to Gary. His own father then dies when Gary is 13 years old.
He moved out of home and moved in with his grandparents. He credited his grandmother and his grandparents with being good influences on his life. His grandmother in particular. Gary Davis and I both went to the same high school, Newcastle High School, which is a major high school in the city. He was a year below me. I do remember him, mostly because he was kind of an unusual guy. He was a really big, awkward guy. He had a high-pitched voice. He didn't have a lot of friends and was targeted by bullies.
Gary claims that it was as a result of his grandfather that he decided to go into nursing. It is one of the caring professions.
Gary Davis ended up studying to do a nursing certificate, and he became a aged care nurse within a year after finishing school. He worked for aged care facilities in Newcastle on the Central Coast.
Time of this incident, he was what's called a Cert 4, or Cert 4 category. That means he's one step down from a registered nurse.
Gary Davis was a team leader, so he worked mostly the day shift.
It was his daily job to administer typical pills, pain care, etc.
But he was not supposed to do all the things that a registered nurse was doing.
The registered nurse, it was their job to administer any injections or any sort of that needed to be injected into any of the residents.
He would consult with doctors about patients, check on patients, make sure they were okay. Gary's relationship with the staff and the other residents seemed to be reasonably good. The registered nurses considered him to be reasonably reliable. It seemed like the residents didn't have a problem with him.
Gary Davis had a few close friends, and one of them he told that he had myeloid leukemia, a form of blood cancer. Even today, cancer is probably the most dreaded diagnosis that I can give any one of my patients.
It had a letterhead from a local hospital here in Newcastle saying that he only had 3 years to live and that he had to undergo certain treatment in that period of time to keep him alive.
He posted pictures of his hair coming out on social media because of chemotherapy. I'm working really hard and I'm trying to do it while I'm going through treatment with cancer. I'm so unwell and yet I'm still battling through. Other people think they have it hard. Having cancer is something that immediately inspires huge sympathy in other people. It turned out that Gary Davis had been exchanging text messages with another member of staff. They were laying bets on which resident of the care home would die next.
The victims had to be injected inside of 8 hours of them showing those symptoms. So that gave us a timeline to work with.
Gary Davis is one of the 25 people that the police narrowed their search down to, who were there when the event took place.
The police bring Gary in for interview, and the person that they are presented with is this placid, mild-mannered, softly spoken, perfect nurse who speaks very highly of his patients, who talks about them as no trouble, as the perfect residents.
There was nothing that stood out about his statement at that particular time.
He was the perfect nurse in interview with the police.
It turned out that Gary Davis had been exchanging text messages with another member of staff about the suspicious deaths. They went way beyond the dark humour that people will use if they're trying to cope with working in a difficult environment.
Hey Gary, how's Gwen? She's blue as but still breathing. And his colleague replied, lol, okay, thanks. Gary replied, happens in 3. Who do you think is number 3? And Gary replied, Bell or Kelly? Now this is significant because the Kelly he mentions here refers to Ryan Kelly, who is the second person who was murdered.
The people that Gary is placing his money on are not the illest patients.
Davis gave a very clear account. I had no reason to believe Mr. Kelly was ill. And that when I returned to work the next day, I fully expected to find Mr. Kelly in his usual way. So therefore, there's no reason why he should be predicting Mr. Kelly is going to be victim 3. He had worked at 5 previous care facilities, and 4 of those 5, he was essentially sacked from there.
So he had a checkered work history before he even got to summer care at Wallsend, but he managed to keep getting work in the aged care sector.
One thing we found in this particular industry, they have a very tough job there to be looking after these people day in, day out. But the reality is, certainly in 2013, you didn't need much of a resume to be able to get a job.
He had various short-term jobs before he arrived at Summer Care. That very much speaks to somebody who perhaps either isn't committed or who doesn't get on with the people that he works with.
He was an unusual kind of guy who was targeted by bullies. But when he spoke to the police, Gary Davis claimed that he had 5 or 6 friends from school and he was popular and had a normal schooling.
And what the police discover is that actually Gary is a pathological liar.
When we were interviewing staff, a number of people commented the fact that he did like to showboat in front of people, and he always wanted to appear to be the cleverest person in the room.
Gary used social media a lot, and he liked to cultivate an image online that he was far more wealthy and important than what he actually was. He wanted people to call him Prince Gary, and that was his name on Facebook.
I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean, but that's the name he wanted people to call him by.
He told people he was a descendant of Scottish royalty. In reality, he was living in a caravan in the backyard of his grandparents' house.
The police find more stories in his background that he's made up, which are, again, just socially uncomfortable, unpleasant lies that he's told.
He had told his grandmother that he had a testicle removed because he had testicular cancer. He actually did go to hospital for another matter, and she visited him there at that time, and he informed her that that's why he was there. In actual fact, that wasn't the case at all, so that's fairly unusual behaviour to lie to your own mother who looks after you.
forged documents from medical practitioners saying that he only had 3.5 years to live.
Davis apparently said that the only thing that was keeping him alive was a box inside his stomach, which was sending out pulses of high-dose chemotherapy. It doesn't exist, and he didn't have cancer.
What this absolutely speaks of is somebody who feels a burning sense of injustice at having never been able to get people to like him. What's clear to me is this is somebody who is prepared to adopt any story, any persona, in order to get people to accept him. This is somebody so desperate, so consumed by that desire that he will do anything. It's somebody stuck in this pattern, stuck in the past.
I can remember writing a story that police had somebody who they thought was a prime suspect. I don't know if I necessarily thought, oh, that makes sense or anything like that. I don't think, even though he was an unusual guy at school, that meant that he was capable of something like this. It made more sense, once we got more information about his personality.
He seemed to relish speaking with us. He certainly didn't shy away from speaking with us at all. It was hard not to see it in any other way that he actually seemed to enjoy being interviewed about it. So we asked him to surrender his phone to us so we can do a full download of his phone, which he agreed to do. We found more text messages to other people we weren't previously aware of.
Gary texted a colleague and said that he didn't want to go to work the next day. His colleague replied to say, "I don't blame you after today." But Gary responded, "Should be good, seeing as though we have 3 in hospital and 2 dead, which saves me 30 and 40 minutes during pill round." His friend replied, "Oh my God, that's just horrible, I would be crying." Gary replied, "Adrenaline kicks in, best feeling. I just enjoy what I do." This is obviously a troubling message, essentially saying it's going to make his life easier that so many of the residents are in hospital or had died, and he took sort of pleasure, or he thought it was enjoyable to have to deal with a situation like that where someone was dying.
It smacks of somebody who is bolstering his own sense of inferiority by the way in which he is belittling these elderly people in his care.
We had an investigative decision to make. What approach are we going to take with Gary Davis at that time? Do we keep it up our sleeves, or do we just go head on and go and confront him? But we made the view, let's go and see him straight away. So we went straight to the aged care facility and met him out the front as he finished his shift. And I asked him if he was prepared to come back to the police station to give us a further statement. I confronted him with the content of the text messages, and he had no real explanation for any of those text messages. He had a demonstrated lack of empathy towards other humans.
The police serve a search warrant, and a search of Gary Davis's home uncovers 2 interesting things.
Gary Davis was found to have a copy of a chapter of the MIMS full prescribing information for insulin. So he was clearly looking into what insulin could do, and he was found to have syringes and needles, about 15 of them, at his home.
There was lots of painkiller medications which were meant to be issued to some of the residents from those previous nursing homes. There was a metal tin which had, I think, about 11 odd clippings from newspapers, and they were death notices. And all of those death notices were relevant to people that were in the nursing homes where he'd worked.
They were very, very macabre.
So the weight of the evidence seems to be pretty compelling. We've got somebody who's who seems to be full of hatred towards old people, who's a pathological liar, who doesn't seem to be able to hold down a caring job. It's all starting to look like Gary might be just the kind of person that they're looking for.
There was no direct witnesses to any of these acts at all. There was no forensic evidence available that could assist.
They've got lots of circumstantial evidence that just doesn't fit, that contrasts with this placid, softly spoken persona that Gary has presented.
And to be honest, there was no clear motive. There was some realism that he might not be found guilty.
I think Gary probably knew, reading the newspaper interviews, that they were focusing on him.
He was living with his grandmother. We knocked on the door, into the room, told him he was under arrest for murder. There was very little reaction from him at all. He didn't protest his innocence. He simply came with us quietly, came back to Newcastle Police Station, and he was charged with murder.
For me, covering this case, it really exploded when he was arrested and charged. It was shocking. For the families of the victims, they were dragged into this years-long criminal justice process. There was so much anticipation and the hope that he'd be held responsible, that justice would be served, and that they could get on with their lives.
We were well aware, and I explained that to all the families too. A very difficult matter to try and prove. When you've got so many tiny pieces to make up such a large puzzle, if you put your brief together, which this one was a very large brief, I think it was over 10,000 pages or something along those lines. Briefs within briefs within briefs.
Gary Davis didn't give evidence in the trial. It was a judge-alone trial, so that's a trial without a jury. And so they can be a little bit different in the sense that not as many things need to be explained to a judge, medical evidence and things like that. And so it was a bit more of a relaxed environment in the court in terms of how the evidence was presented. Didn't have to worry about a jury finding out something they shouldn't find out and the trial being aborted.
When we think about murder, we tend to think about motive, means, and opportunity.
There was all these instances where he was caught stealing medication from some of the residents.
The police discovered Gary Davis has created a Facebook group designed to harass staff. And then there's an incident where one of the patients urinates on Gary, and Gary posts, "I hate old people," as part of this.
All the other people that we interviewed, the staff members, they were in states of shock, belief, emotion, because they were actually very fond of the three victims. Whereas Davis never showed any emotion or care at all towards these people at any stage to us. Some of the family members had made a couple of complaints about his just general demeanour towards the residents. They just didn't like his attitude that he had towards their family members.
Despite repeated counselling about how to address patients with empathy and how to show compassion towards patients, he had repeatedly failed to change his behaviour.
You have to have knowledge of how insulin works.
He had read literature, or he had literature at his house, about how overdoses of insulin could cause death.
Did he have access to insulin? Well, it was kept under lock and key, but Gary Davis had access to the key.
There'd been a change in policy, and at some point earlier in the year, he'd gone from being able to administer insulin or injections to no longer being able to do that. Gary still continued to administer injections, even though he wasn't allowed to. He was somebody who liked that responsibility, and he thought that made him more important than possibly he was. He'd been warned about that and continued to do it.
Was he on duty on those occasions? And the answer is yes, he was.
In the case of the 3 victims, he had given them oral medication on the day that they were all injected, and so he had been in close contact with all 3 of them. I can remember the families of the victims being disgusted. There was insult to injury, I think, so that not only their loved ones died at the hands of a nurse that was supposed to be looking after them, but these people were texting and predicting as if it was a game, their lives.
Now, any defence, their job is going to be show that their client didn't do it. They've only got to find one small bit of doubt of his guilt or innocence, and the whole case falls apart. If we knew we were up against it.
The defence painted him as just a hard-working aged care nurse who came to work every day, who had a good relationship with the staff, had a good relationship with the residents, and had no reason to do these things.
He might not be found guilty. Had to explain that to the family members.
On the 28th of September, Gary Davis was found guilty of the murders of Gwen Fowler and Ryan Kelly, and guilty of administering medication with intent to murder Audrey Manuel.
The judge was essentially left with no doubt that Gary Davis was the person who'd injected all 3 residents over that weekend in October 2013.
When that guilty verdict came down, there was crying, there was clapping, there was tears, there was all sorts of emotion from all of the family members. The only person that showed no emotion was Gary Davis himself. He just sat there.
And the judge's comments were completely damning on Gary Davis, drawing attention to both the incredible vulnerability of these patients that he murdered and the complete abuse of trust he showed in doing so.
I think he thought he was going to be found not guilty. He was just one of those cocky sort of people. He just thought he was the smartest person in the room. He thought he'd get off this too.
The judge said that in his judgment. The police did an incredible job. They actually won awards for their investigation.
It's the greatest compliment and honour you could have to investigate the murder of someone's loved one, a family member. But it also comes with a burden that it's your job to find the person who did that. Any investigation like this, given the enormity of it, you essentially live and breathe it at the time. Your own personal life does tend to go on hold to an extent, and certainly when you do successfully resolve it, like we did in this case, it's a great sense of relief to us as investigators that we can bring some sort of closure back for the family members.
Gary Davis was sentenced to 40 years in prison with a minimum of 30 years to be served before he was eligible for parole.
2044 is when he's first eligible for parole. He'll be 57.
One of the tragedies of this case is that his lack of feeling for the people he was looking after and the very extreme consequences of his actions when he gave these people life-ending doses of insulin.
What we're seeing is his revenge for what he sees has happened to him when he was a child. It's revenge picking, in fact, on people that he would have seen as very similar to his grandparents, the only people in his life who did treat him, apparently, with respect and love.
There was a huge case in Newcastle, and it had a lot of impact, basically, how people viewed the aged care sector in the area. It took a while for that, to wear off.
I don't think he had any care at all towards these people. He really shouldn't have been doing that job in the first place.
Gary Davis essentially got greedy. If he had only targeted one person that weekend, then I think there's no doubt he would have gotten away with it. He was essentially an evil serial killer who was preying on his elderly patients in order to score points with other staff and make him look smart.
It's unusual that a murder offence is captured on CCTV. Very harrowing.
Police boys, there's actually a dead body in the ditch.
Couldn't even recognise her. Black eyes. Everything was just basically swollen and bruised.
He's an animal. Really, he's destroyed my family.
They started kicking me and punching me and I was terrified.
We had to take a dangerous offender off the streets.
He's just evil. He's took a mother away from her 5 children. That's the monster.
"10 miles south of Birmingham lies the pretty Worcestershire village of Hopwood.
Hopwood is what I would describe as a rural area, lots of country lanes.
Very peaceful and tranquil, the kind of thing you'd expect from this kind of place.
You've got the canal down there. You've got a couple of nice pubs. It's just lovely.
It's a very sleepy village. There's obviously not much traffic coming around here. But everyone knows everybody in the village.
They look out for each other. They can go to each other to ask for help. It's a really tight-knit community.
But the peace of this rural idyll is about to be shattered.
Emergency, which service?
Police boys. Police emergency. Hello, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just walking my dog up the lane at the moment. There's actually a dead body in the ditch.
Just before 6 a.m. on that morning, dog walker walking his dog in Wast Hills Lane, and the dog came across a pile of leaves. And the dog walker then discovered there was blood underneath the leaves.
I just saw a pile of blood on the road and I thought, where's all that come from? And the dog's gone to a ditch and I thought, somebody's done rubbish. And then I could see an hand and a leg. I thought, sorry.
It is the body of a woman in her 30s.
Obviously, that prompted an emergency response from police and the ambulance service.
To find a scene like that is incredibly shocking, especially in this area.
Might have been at my car. I'm not sure. Can you get them as quick as you can?
Medics pronounce the woman dead, and it is deemed as a potential hit and run.
Upon receiving the report, the police attended the location and immediately set up a crime scene, preventing others from accessing the road, so that the investigations can begin into what had happened and how it had happened.
West Mercia's Detective Chief Inspector Jerry Smith heads up the investigation.
We're currently standing in Wast Hills Lane, in the actual inner corner in the scene itself. The pool of blood was located around this area. And then what you actually had as well were drag marks in blood leading across the road, which was obviously where the body had been dragged to place it in the ditch. The body was covered in debris and vegetable matter. When I initially attended the scene, officers thought that it could have been a non-stop fatal road traffic collision.
The grim discovery becomes the talk of the village.
This must have been a huge shock for the local residents, finding out that a body had been discovered in their locality.
that kind of, concern, because this is a place where things don't happen very often, would have been high, really high level.
Everybody did talk about it. And we were all going, oh my God, was she walking? Because we used to walk down that a lot. We used to go a nice long walk down to the canal.
I was keenly aware that going forward it was highly likely to raise significant concerns within that area, particularly at that time because we didn't have an identification of the body and we didn't know what type of incident we were actually dealing with.
But investigators have their work cut out, trying to establish what actually happened and the identity of the motorist who potentially hit her, then drove off.
The rural nature of the scene obviously means that we're going to get less likelihood of CCTV evidence and witness evidence because, as you can see, there's nobody around, just causing complexities to the investigation.
The police carried an immediate investigation. They will have spoken to witnesses at the houses nearby, knocking on doors to see if anybody had heard or seen anything at the time, as well as conducting painstaking CCTV inquiries to try and identify the movements of the deceased.
So the next priority in an investigation like this is to identify the body, to work out who this woman is.
The police identified a rucksack at the scene. Inside that rucksack was a mobile phone.
Fingerprints and DNA swabs were taken from the phone, and then it was opened up and identification and details from the handset, from the SIM were taken, and then by making inquiries with the telecommunications provider, we managed to identify through our intelligence systems that it was Kerry. Kerry Owen was a 35-year-old mother of 5 children. She was initially from the Peterborough area.
The first Kerry's family hear about her death is via her boyfriend, Alan Edney.
It was 27th of May, and I sat at home, and my son received a phone call saying Kerry had died in a hit and run in Birmingham.
I was in my granddad's living room, and he got the call, and then he told me. He said that your mum has passed away. Everyone was just upset and shocked.
I got a phone call, and he said to me that they were out camping, and she went off and got hit by a car, and the car drove off.
And he says, we were running across the farmer's field, and there was a gateway. He says, I think I thought I slipped and went through the gateway, and I looked at the side of me, and Kerry lay there with a hole in her head. And I see a black Peugeot 206 in the distance.
Obviously, I broke down. I was literally in tears. One of my sister's mates who I lived with, he broke down. He just hugged me and he goes, we're going to get justice for her one way.
See, I was upset, she's my friend. I've always looked out for her, and I felt let down that I couldn't protect her because I've always been there to protect her.
She was a kind-hearted person. She'd do anything for anybody.
She would always look after Kyrie, who's my oldest son, buy him new clothes, feed him, change him. They would always be together.
Everyone really loved her, like she was just like adorable and that.
While Kerry's family try to come to terms with the devastating news, investigators are examining the scene to try to establish what actually happened.
In the addresses nearby, some of those addresses had CCTV, and a vehicle had been seen leaving West Hills Lane at about 4 a.m. And relatively quickly, by attending a local address, we were able to work out that that was highly likely to be somebody that lived at one of those addresses and that was going to work. And we were subsequently able to find that car and just reassure ourselves there was no damage or blood or anything on that car consistent with the road traffic collision.
DCI Smith also has other concerns when he re-examines the scene.
I found it immediately unusual that anyone would have stopped in those circumstances and particularly made the effort to cover up blood and deposit the body in a ditch and then cover the body as well. The lack of any tyre marks, the lack of any vehicle debris, to me indicated that it was not a road traffic collision.
And officers speaking to local residents also suspect all is not as it seems.
Doing some initial witness trawling, people had heard voices in the road.
CCTV from a nearby address points towards the area in the lane where the voices are coming from.
It didn't cover the scene, but crucially what it did have was audio. At approximately 4:05 that morning, you start to hear voices. It's difficult to hear, but it's clear there's two people and that someone is distressed, and then gradually those voices turn into screaming. There's some significant instance of violence occurring at that time in the road, and that lasts for about 5 minutes. I wasn't dealing with a road traffic collision, and it was highly likely to be a homicide.
In Hopwood, Worcestershire, 35-year-old mother of 5, Kerry Owen, has been found dead by the roadside in mysterious circumstances. After viewing nearby CCTV just hours before her body is discovered, police now suspect Kerry was murdered as she walked along Wast Hill Lane.
You hear parents screaming, and then later on, we hear more screaming. This is particularly significant because of the gap between the screaming that you hear may indicate 2 separate attacks.
"40 metres before Kerry's final resting place, police uncover evidence of that first attack.
This is the scene of what I think could have been the initial attack site, with blood was found on the ground, and in fact a dislodged tooth was found in this area as well by the fingertips search. There was also some orange debris in the road. Officers thought it was a cigarette lighter. Straight away it became obvious there were 2 separate attack sites, 2 assaults, and that is then potentially corroborated by what you hear on the CCTV. There is a gap between the screaming, which may be consistent with an assault in one location, either Kerry moving herself or being dragged to the second location where she was finally killed.
When the post-mortem results come back, they reveal more about what happened to Kerry.
The pathologist found that Kerry had essentially been subjected to a savage beating. She had over 80 injuries on her body.
She suffered significant facial injuries. She had fractures to her nose. She had a tooth knocked out. She had a fracture to the hyoid bone in her neck. The injuries were terrible.
The final conclusion was that Kerry had died from enforced trauma. Basically, she had been beaten to death.
We obviously had to identify her. You couldn't even recognise her. She was all swollen, she had black eyes, they'd had to shave all her hair off. Everything was just basically swollen and bruised.
She had a hole in her head. Obviously, I wanted to go and see her, and my niece, she was like, "Nah, don't, because it's going to scar you for life." She goes, "It's not a nice sight."
I just felt sick. You know, to think that how could somebody do that to somebody who wouldn't even fight back? Kerry wouldn't have fought back.
The injuries are more consistent with a sustained attack. They aren't really consistent with a hit and run. So that's question marks over Alan Edney's story.
Her boyfriend's claims that she'd been hit by a black Peugeot 206 during their camping trip also don't add up.
If that happened to me, I'd be devastated. I'd be crying my eyes out. I'd be absolutely destroyed. He was so calm.
I thought it was a bit funny because I've known Kerry 21 years. Kerry doesn't do camping. You know, so I thought that seemed a bit strange.
I used to buy and sell cars and everything. I've never seen a Peugeot 206 black one in years. It must be a proper collector's car. It was unbelievable.
last photos taken by Kerry's phone confirms the couple had indeed been camping in nearby woods. Officers seek out and find their campsite, but something else about Alan's story doesn't stack up.
Edney's account was that they had come from the campsite and for some reason decided to have a race. He'd got caught in the gate, and as that happened, he'd heard the sound of a collision and Kerry being hit by a vehicle, which didn't stop. And it just doesn't make sense that they would have climbed over this gate and she'd have been hit by a car. We're now hundreds of yards from the location where Kerry's body was found. The road traffic collision just didn't stand any scrutiny. Alan Edney basically told some of Kerry's family members he had in fact called the police and an ambulance, and he had then attended a local hospital with Kerry where she was pronounced deceased.
He describes to his grandmother actually that he's had a statement taken by a police officer who had then dropped him back.
We found no evidence of any of that at all.
With Edney now firmly in their sights as a suspect, detectives dig deeper into his history with Kerry.
Kerry Owen first met Edney in March 2020 via a dating site.
I remember saying to me she'd met a man on the internet from Birmingham.
And within a week, she moved to Birmingham with him.
First time we went down, we met him in the town centre, and he seemed lovely.
I told her to really come back to Peterborough so she could be with her family, but she said no, she met the man of her dreams, basically.
All Kerry wanted in life was to be loved, and, you know, if somebody told her they loved her, straight away Kerry would be all for that, if you know what I mean. So she was sort of a bit vulnerable when it comes around relationships.
But barely a month into the budding romance, cracks begin to show.
She phoned me and told me that he was beating her up. And that's when I asked her, you know, to come back to Peterborough, to her dad's house, or come to my house. But, you know, she obviously stayed there.
She stayed in contact for a couple of months, then all of a sudden the phone calls stopped, Facebook stopped. I kept texting her, are you okay, are you okay? Nothing come back. We're worrying about her. Then the next thing, Kerry's texted me, she says he's in prison.
In 2021, there was a serious incident where Kerry and Alan's mum had taken a short holiday to Blackpool, and that resulted in a serious assault where Alan assaulted Kerry and his mum.
I think she rang me, she FaceTimed me and told me that he'd just been arrested, and she showed me her face and she had some grazes or black eye. She had been in the hospital. She told me she'd been in the hospital. She had marks on her belly because he had stamped on her belly.
So I went there. That's when she told me as well she was pregnant with his baby.
For a man to assault his own mother and also assault his partner, especially when she's pregnant, kind of really paints the picture of the kind of man that Edney was, with this violent streak that ran through him.
I was obviously really shocked. And I was confused as well, because he was obviously acting so nice when we went to Birmingham. But I was confused.
She was still sticking up for him. When you're in them kind of relationships, it's kind of hard to get out.
Edney is jailed for 6 months for the assault on Kerry and his mother.
She stayed in contact while he was in prison. It was like we'd got our niece back and the kids had got their mum back. Then all of a sudden the contact stopped again.
Unfortunately, Kerry did maintain contact with Alan when he was in prison. But when Alan was released from prison, he rekindled his relationship with Kerry, and they in fact lived together. He assaulted her again, and he was in fact on bail not to contact her.
Detectives uncover more worrying incidents involving Edney.
I went down there on bonfire night, and we all went round there. We'd done fireworks, and Alan got very drunk, and my mum had told him to stop drinking. He obviously kicked off about it, and then Alan started screaming at my mum, calling her all different names. He was verbally violent to her. So we were like, okay, we're going home.
It is the last time Yasmin sees her mum alive.
I feel bad for leaving her, but I had to put my kid first in that situation. I can't expect my kid to be around that.
Having delved into Edney's history, police investigating Kerry's death make a decision.
The police, having conducted their initial investigations, it became clear that Edney was the person who they wanted to arrest for this offence.
Once we'd identified a location for him, an address on the nearby Hawksley estate that was within walking distance of the crime scene, was in fact his grandmother's address. When officers attended Alan's nan's address, Alan was present, and he was arrested on suspicion of murder.
Police investigating the murder of mother of 5 Kerry Owen in Hopwood, Worcestershire, have arrested her partner, Alan Edney.
Edney was arrested on the evening of the 27th of May 2022. His family were entirely surprised at his arrest, given that they believed that Kerry Owen had died in a road traffic collision.
He didn't make any admissions. He made no comment to all questions put to him during the interview process. But he did make comments outside of the process, indicating that he had an alibi and that he wasn't responsible for the offence.
Word spreads throughout the village and to Kerry's family back in Peterborough.
The police came round, my granddad's, and basically said Alan Edney has been arrested on suspicion of murder. It all made sense then, like it all adds up why he was lying, why people had been told different stories and stuff like that, and we all had to do our statements.
Meanwhile, police uncover more evidence about Edney's behaviour.
Our investigations into Alan Edney's history demonstrated that he had a significant history of domestic abuse on intimate partners, but also on his family members. There seemed to be a pattern where alcohol was a significant trigger for that offending behaviour. And we found a number of incidences in Alan Edney's past of significant domestic violence. One of those occurred on New Year's Day, 2018.
I was celebrating with friends. I came back and I heard my friend screaming. So I've gone all the way up. She's opened up the door, bright red-faced. I went, "You right?" She went, "Yeah, just, come in." And then I was dragged into the bedroom. They started, kicking me and punching me, and I was on the floor. I did not do anything for him to do anything. It was just automatic kicking and punching. He was drunk. He'd been strangling her with a broom. You could physically see the broom was on the bed. At one stage I could get up so I could move because he went after her again. So I thought, this is my easy way to get out. But I went the wrong way. And I went towards the window.
The woman claims Edney then pushed her halfway out of the window as her friend looked on in horror.
Next minute I know is I'm looking down. Well, literally near enough out the window. And she literally dragged him back to pull me back in. I'd come back and he started kicking me again, but he was kicking me in the side, in the stomach, in the legs. My blood was all over the floor. My friend helped me try and get away. She shouted out, "She's pregnant." He went, "I don't care, another one could be dead then."
Edney's victim flees for her life. In March 2018, Edney pleaded guilty to assault and was jailed for 3.5 years.
carry out an attack of that ferocity suggests a man with a serious violent tendency and where really there are no holds barred.
Mentally destroyed me. Physically destroyed me. I had to run from where I lived. Literally, I couldn't stay there. He was evil.
Following the attack, his victim posted warnings about Edney online, prompting his now girlfriend Kerry Owen to reach out.
Kerry then contacted me and my friend. We persuaded her. He'd beat her up. But because she was pregnant with his son, she was like, oh, I still love him. Next thing I know is that she's dead. And that absolutely killed me. Because nobody listened. This could have been prevented. I swear it could have been prevented.
With Edney in police custody being questioned over Kerry's death, her family visit the scene of her murder.
So we stopped the car, and then we went and laid, like the flowers, but you could still see Kerry's blood on the road, and that's what got me, is I had to walk away. Felt like she was there kind of thing.
And this man and lady pulled up in a car, and I said, do you know what? I said, whoever found her must be destroyed. And this bloke just said, I didn't want to tell you, I'm the man who found her. And basically destroyed him.
What kind of person could just leave someone laid in the road? She's just been left in the middle of nowhere.
This Alan Ed, he's ruined everybody. From the person who found her to our family. Really, he's destroyed my family.
With Edney refusing to answer police questions, detectives need to build a case against him. They continue trawling CCTV from local residents to piece together his movements leading up to the murder.
The CCTV inquiries were able to map the movements of Edney and Kerry Owen. It showed that they'd been together on the afternoon of the 26th of May.
For some reason, Alan and Kerry had decided to go camping in a wooded area near Wast Hills Lane. They had gone to the wooded area earlier in the daytime when it was light to set up the campfire, and there's pictures on Kerry's phone of a makeshift shelter and a lot of wood stacked up. They had then gone back to Alan's nan's address, had a meal, spent some time there, before then making their way back up Wast Hills Lane to the campsite. There's in fact some CCTV footage of them making that journey around 10 p.m. They spent 3.5 to 4 hours at the campsite, and there's a number of photographs on Kerry's phone of Alan at the campsite with a very large fire. He's likely to have consumed a lot of alcohol on that night, and there was evidence of alcohol being consumed at the location. For some reason unknown, they decided to leave the campsite in the early hours of the morning.
At around 4 a.m, the sound of an argument breaks out between the couple on CCTV. Then Kerry is heard, fighting for her life.
It's a sustained attack for several minutes, and then it's silence.
Police then make a breakthrough. Their suspect is spotted on CCTV in broad daylight, alone.
Around 50 minutes later, the CCTV captured Edney leaving the locality of the scene.
Wearing a distinctive t-shirt that he's shown wearing on Kerry's mobile phone.
He's wiping his hands, and he looks a bit agitated, he looks quite erratic, and he kind of walks down the lane, then turns off.
A search of Edney's home seals his fate.
When officers searched the address, there was a particularly significant find. The clothing that he'd been wearing on the night, the distinctive t-shirt with the motive on the front, tracksuit bottoms and trainers which we could see on the CCTV video and also on Kerry's mobile phone photograph. That was found in a bin bag behind a cupboard in the kitchen area of the address.
The bag of clothes appear to have blood on them.
The police submitted the clothing that had been hidden by Edney for DNA analysis, and the blood on that clothing was found to be Kerry Owens.
Everything is starting to come together for the police in their investigation.
3 days after Alan Edney was arrested on suspicion of the murder of Kerry Owen, the Crown Prosecution Service made the decision to charge him with murder.
In Hopwood, Worcestershire, Alan Edney has been charged with the murder of his girlfriend, mother of 5, Kerry Owen. But the hard graft doesn't stop for the investigators.
Even though Alan Edney had been charged with murder, I'd say that the period leading up to a trial does involve an element of nervousness on behalf of the investigation team. There's a lot more detailed work that has to be completed to get the case ready for trial.
The police will still carry on trying to gather as much evidence. They're still pursuing anything they can to really kind of seal this case.
We had employed a number of forensic experts in the case. One of those was an odontologist. By ensuring a detailed fingertip search of the scene, we'd managed to find a tooth, and the odontologist was able to mechanically fit that tooth into Kerry's jaw to show that her tooth had been knocked out during the assault. Any marks were found on Kerry's face. I was concerned that could have meant there was a weapon that had missing, because we were never able to get any support from a forensic expert. Alan Edney's wear was what had left those marks on her face, but ultimately there was not any evidence of a weapon being used, and it's likely that he used his hands and feet as his weapons.
The CPS and the police think it's built up a really strong case against Edney, but it's now over to the lawyers and for the case to go to court.
I was in a really bad way. My head was like all over. It was like I couldn't sleep, because it was like, is he gonna get found like guilty? Is he gonna or is he gonna walk? I didn't know what was gonna happen and that.
Kerry's family come face to face once again with her killer.
I was nervous, and then obviously during the court case, I was even more nervous. He was just sitting there, giving me like evil looks.
I just stared at him. If looks could kill, he'd have been dead. Just to let him know, he took my niece's life, but he's not took the rest of ours. Do you know what I mean?
My sister, he was laughing in her face in the court, like he just didn't care.
There was just no remorse or sadness whatsoever when this is a woman who's had your baby. He had no remorse for what he'd done.
The court hears the harrowing evidence of Kerry's last moments.
They did say, we're about to play it, if you would like to leave the room, then leave.
The last time I ever heard my niece screaming for her life was on that man's CCTV. So, it's horrible, really. And then you get told in the court he was still kicking her and beating her after she was dead, basically. So he must beat her to a pole.
His defence at court was effectively that he admitted responsibility for Kerry's death, but that was on the grounds of provocation and diminished responsibility. Edney's defence was essentially that Kerry had brought up on the night issues around him being abused himself as a child, and then that had provoked him into acting the way he did.
Edney blames his brutal attack on mental illness and a loss of control.
The psychiatrist agreed that Edney suffered from a mental abnormality. However, we were able to prove that that abnormality of mind did not contribute towards his behaviour on that day. Part of the evidence put forward was the previous assaults upon both Kerry Owen and other partners. That helped us prove to the jury that Edney knew what he was doing when he killed Kerry Owen.
The prosecution also outlines how calm and collected Edney was in the aftermath of the crime, and how he spent time covering his tracks.
At that time of year in May, leaf matter would have been readily available. He used some of that to cover up a significant pooling of blood in the middle of the road, but then he also dragged Kerry's body into a deep ditch nearby, deposited her in there, and then covered her with a significant amount of vegetation which he took from undergrowth nearby. It was really important for the prosecution to paint a detailed picture of the web of lies, the accounts that he'd provided to his own family and Kerry's family, and we didn't find any evidence to show that Kerry was likely to have provoked him to violence in that way.
In fact, Edney hadn't lost his control. He knew exactly what he was doing.
It was in the hands of the jury from that point. I think there's always an element of nervousness.
You do not know how the jury view the case, so naturally there's an apprehension. The jury unanimously found Edney guilty of murder.
We were all well happy. We were all jumping up and down on the seating area. We were all bouncing up and down on there, shouting. We were all happy.
I think the overwhelming emotion was one of relief. We had delivered justice for Kerry Owen, her family, and also to help to protect the wider public from Edney.
Alan Edney is jailed for life, with a minimum of 20 years.
He is, in my view, a significant danger to women, and I think that result protects other women from potentially becoming similar victims.
It ensures that Edney will be behind bars for a very long time.
Justice was served, but I don't think the sentence was hard enough. It's basically probably destroyed our family. The man's evil.
He's took a mother away from her 5 children. That's a monster. Hopefully he'll never get out. You know, the best thing to him to do is die in jail.
The murder is forever etched in the memory of the village of Hopwood.
It will have a lasting impact on this community. It's such a horrendous crime on their doorstep in such a, what is otherwise a lovely place to live. And that will be with them for a long time.
For the people who live there, you know, this is kind of a blot on their history and something that I don't think any of them will forget.
But it's Kerry's family in Peterborough who are left to pick up the pieces.
When someone's took away from you instantly, so young, it's so hard, I think, to carry on.
There was some harsh moments, you know, where I tried taking my life. Because I just wanted to be with her because I basically lost her, and not just like a sister, it's like a best, like a best friend, and I just miss her and that.
So it's sad, really. It's sad for them all. She's, missed by everyone.
She never got to meet my youngest kids. My kids can't now grow up the way they were growing up. Now it all has to change because she can't be there.
Even the grandchildren, they always look in stars and say, Nanny. It's just heartbreaking, really.